I'm still curious for more of your observations about the connections between the cult that you were in and the cult that you see your daughter as being in. You've said that you have not chosen to voice your opinion that she's in a cult, but do you feel like your own experience in a cult has shifted or informed your perceptions witnessing your daughter get involved in gender ideology?
Yeah, this is a great question because the gender ideology phenomenon that's going on right now is really something new from a historical perspective. So let me maybe it would help to talk a little bit about what a cult is and then kind of expand from there. So a cult, the definition that I really like the best is a high control community. And there's a spectrum, right? Like on one side of that spectrum, you might have something like Jonestown, where everybody commits suicide together. And on the other side of that spectrum, you might have like a multi-level marketing scam, where you're being controlled in a kind of business environment. So along that spectrum of control, religious communities will fall somewhere. Even a traditional, you know, bona fide church is going to have a certain level of control that it exerts over its members. And when taken to an extreme, it really becomes extremely detrimental to the lives of the people involved. And so that's the kind of cult we were in where, everything was controlled. Everything from what, honestly, what you eat, because there are certain days where there was strict fasting that was imposed, to when you have sex with your partner, um, you know, and it's hard for people who haven't been in a situation like this to understand how anybody could submit to that level of control. The other thing about the cult that we were involved with is that it was led by a very charismatic authority figure and religious authority figure. So, that's very different from, if we want to start now comparing and contrasting this kind of traditional cult where you've got a charismatic leader controlling the lives of his or her followers. That's kind of the image of a cult that most people probably have. But when you look at what's going on with gender ideology, it's different, right? Because it's distributed. First of all, it's decentralized. There is no single leader or mastermind behind the whole thing. Um, Gender ideology is something that has kind of evolved, and uh, I kind of like to look at this from the perspective of memetics, and for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with this idea, like memetics is this idea that ideas themselves are mutating and reproducing and evolving in the substrate of human culture. And that's kind of what's happening here, where gender ideology has evolved to fit some really specific ecological niches, ecological niches in our culture. Where, for example, just the way the internet itself works, it's a medium where these kind of ideas can spread very rapidly. Then you look at uh, the kind of psychological needs of teenagers. There's a huge gaping void there, ready to absorb anything that's going to give them answers or make them feel like they have an identity in a fairly rootless culture, which is kind of like the one that we're living in. Then you look at there's a political sphere where there's a vacuum here as well, where if you think about all of the strides that have been made for um, gay rights, which I think are great. The problem is that the trans rights have hitched a ride right alongside that, so that in many people's minds they're one and the same thing, when in fact they're not, because there's this whole medical aspect. Then you add in this, the part of this where the medical industry, there's so much money to be made. So when I look at this from a memetics perspective, the ideology has evolved to fit all of these niches perfectly. And so it's this new phenomenon where it's not like a traditional cult where there's one kind of leader. It's not like a traditional religion where it's offering a clear idea of salvation, though there is hidden in it this idea of salvation, where if you just uh, take the medicine, so to speak, if you go down this role of transition, all of your problems are going to get solved. So it shares a lot of elements with traditional cults and traditional religions. And at the same time, I really feel that this is a new phenomenon, and it shares, and it's got characteristics that we've never seen before, all combined into one social phenomenon.